up do 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 up do 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 up do 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 up do 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 do. Hello everyone, my name's Stonesy Boy and welcome back to Reading with Stonesy. Today we are reading pages 201 to pages 218. However, we are starting on page 200 because the new story is about Malaya meeting Billy. So somehow Billy got girls and I don't. Robots can do everything better than humans, I guess. Anyways, without further ado, let's end this book. As Malaya pulled up to the small house and stood at a row of similar houses, she asked herself for at least the 20th time if she lost her mind. She was about to meet a guy she met online. She agreed to meet him at a house. Was she insane? Should he be a serial killer? And was she to serve himself up in a juicy roast? Malaya let her car idle and craned her neck to look through the passenger window. She studied the house. It looked okay, she figured. The yard was neat, the lawn was green and mowed, the bushes were trimmed, the house had a clean white sliding. The windows were sparkling. It didn't even look like a lair of serial killer. But then, what did a serial killer's lair look like? Oh, just get on with it, Malala told herself. If he kills you, it'll save you money on surgeries. You won't have to try to look good enough for someone better than a serial killer. Malala snorted out her dumb joke. She got of the car and treaded briskly at the walk before she could talk herself out of what she was doing. Standing on the white painted porch, Malala took a deep breath. She rang the doorbell. The door opened almost immediately. Billy must have been watching for her. As soon as the door opened, Malala put on her best smile and hoped Billy would see her even white teeth instead of her wide nose or double chin she'd taken care of with eye makeup. She knew her eyes were her best feature, so she was pretty good about her big brown eyes. Their chestnut-colored white skin was a positive too. He had a great complexion. Hopefully, he focused on that as well. The first thing Malaya registered was she looked up at a man standing in front of her was tall. He towered over her. The second thing you noticed that he was a really cute face. That was a surprise. Yeah, his cheeks were a bit chipmunky. Maybe that's why he wanted a facial sculpting done. But all in all, he was pretty good looking. Malaya dropped her gaze to check out Billy's body. Her smile faltered. The man standing before her wore a short-sleeved gray shirt. And extending from open sleeves were two gray prosthetic arms that ended prosthetic hands with articulated fingers. Arms, plural. Both arms were artificial. Wow. Why hadn't Billy mentioned he was missing his arms? It was so heart-rending. Malaya's eyes moistened. She blinked, hoping Billy hadn't seen her pity. She smiled at him. He needed someone to accept him for who he was, not feel sorry for him. He could give him an acceptance. This man needed her. She liked that idea. But should she say anything about the prosthetics? Should she ask what happened? Hello, Billy said. I'm happy that you are here. Billy's voice didn't match his words. His voice was flat and lacked an inflection. It was like the voice of a robot. Although Malaya hadn't said anything yet, Billy spoke again. You look very nice, she said. This is a pretty purple dress. Malaya took back at Billy's face. He was smiling at her as he pleased with what he saw. That made her feel good, and she was happy she could use his smile because the flat tone of his voice belied his words and expression. He sounded a little robotic, but no one would help how they sounded. Malaya found her own voice. Hi, she said. She didn't mention his arms. Please, come in, Billy said. I've ordered a white cake. White is the only color I eat. I used to bake my own cakes, but my new limbs do not work satisfactorily. Billy raised his arms and then gestured at his legs. He stepped back at the door in an awkward backward lunge-like move. Malaya looked down at Billy's legs. Billy's legs were hidden inside of a pair of gray slacks, but the slacks were tight enough to reveal an unnatural outline of limbs. Were Billy's legs prosthetic too? Malaya couldn't contain herself. She blurted the question. Billy non-placidity. I had all my limbs replaced. The result was not as I expected it would be, but I am adapting. Malaya teared up again. He wiped her eyes, stepped forward, and put her hand on Billy's shoulder. I really admire your attitude. You're very brave. What an amazing man, Malaya thought. Most men would be resentful or angry if they'd gone through whatever Billy had gone through, but Billy obviously didn't feel sorry for himself at all. Instead of acting like a victim, he was the perfect gentleman. How cool was that? Every other guy Malaya had been with acted like a smartass from the get-go. No wonder they'd been losers. They were never treated her with respect. Billy was treating her with respect. Limbless and flat-voiced or not, Billy is better than the guys that Malala had dated up till now. Malala's smile widened. It's nice to meet you, Billy. I'm happy to be here. Malala entered Billy's house, and she could see that he looked nice from the inside as it did on the outside. A guy who kept his house clean? Go figure. She was also delighted and surprised that she enjoyed the 2 hours they spent in white cake and milk in Billy's spotless kitchen. When Malaya left Billy, she promised he'd come back, and intended to keep the promise in the past. She probably would have given Billy a pass, His android-like voice and his deal disconcerting, and his lack of limbs made him a pinch to reel all over the place when he walked, like he was walking on the deck of a ship in a tropical storm. But Malila had learned the hard way that superficial stuff didn't matter as much as the stuff you could see. In spite of the obvious limitations, Billy had two qualities Malila really liked. Three, actually. One, he listened when she talked. He really listened. His gaze never left her face when she spoke, as if she was saying the most important thing in the world. Two, when he talked, he was interesting. He obviously well-read. He was a nice change of pace from the idiots Malila usually went out with. And three, he was nice to her. He was very kind. Malila figured out she could do worse. In fact, she already had done worse. Much, much worse. In addition to Malila and Billy's life took up a lot of his time. This, he concluded, was a good thing. Expanded his knowledge base even more. It gave him a new purpose as well. After Malila's third visit to his house, Malila asked him what he was to her. It was a baffling question at first. Malila was many things. She was human. She was a woman. She was a visitor in Billy's house. What did she mean? What was the right response? This is why Billy liked this time with Malila. She forced him to think in ways his processor had never thought of before. Before Billy had an attempt to reply, Malila clarified her question. I mean, are we just friends, or am I your girlfriend? Her face flushed a little. Billy knew the flushed faces would mean embarrassment. He didn't want Malila to be embarrassed. His readings indicated that humans didn't like being embarrassed. You are my girlfriend, Billy said. This is true. She was a girl, and she was his friend. Malila gave Billy a huge smile. Then she leaned in and kissed him right on the mouth. Billy's neuroprocessing system included two things from the kiss. One, kissing was an experience worth having more than once. Second, Malila was indeed Billy's girlfriend. He found this satisfying. As satisfying as having a girlfriend was, however, Billy still was unsettled by his failure to live up to his robotic potential. He needed to continue his self-important plan. And at that end, he called Doc. Hey kid, Doc said, coughing into Billy's auditory centers. How are the new limbs? My improved limbs have not improved me as much as I expected them to, Billy said. I require additional work. The Doc coughed again. What do you want now? Much as I have trouble taking your money, you don't have any more appendages to swap out. And our angular facial structure would be more consistent with my internal nature, Billy said. I require metal plates implanted over my cheekbones, under the skin, to achieve that structure. Doc coughed and breathed heavily into the phone for several seconds. Yeah, okay, I can do that. Doc named a fee. Billy agreed to it. They also agreed on a date. Billy called Malila. I'm leaving to have surgery in 2 days. I will contact you when I get back. Oh, okay, Malila said. Do you want me to come with you? No, thank you, Billy said. Actually, Billy would not have been okay with Malila's company, but Doc had imputed into Billy's system instructions similar to those of Billy's mom. Billy was not to tell anyone about Doc and the surgeries. He did in the basement or in the old mental hospital. Doc's work and his address were both secrets. Okay, call me when you get back, Malila said. I'll come take care of you. That sounds nice. Thank you, Billy said. The week before Billy could call Mariah after surgery, Billy's face swelled up twice its normal size. The incisions Doc made in Billy's cheeks wouldn't stop bleeding. They leaked greenish pus that Norma had said they would stop at before Billy could go home. Norma made Billy swallow a lot of antibiotics. She changed the gauze dressings on the face multiple times before they finally agreed on Doc could take Billy back to his house. Billy, checking for the results of the latest procedure in the mirror, thought the metal plates were 50% effective and 50% ineffective. They would make his face square and more animatronic-like. However, they'd also left him with jagged, livid red scars that were more reminiscent of a monster than they were of a robot. These scars would also add to the already copious amount of his pain-like sensations. He would have his research more options. He didn't yet achieve his goal. Malila barely agreed with Billy's assessment. When she arrived at evening to take care of Billy, the smile it wore when she opened the door disappeared the instant she looked at him. Oh, she said. I'm not done yet, Billy said. The next set of modifications will get me closer to my goal. Malila didn't come in the house when Billy opened the door wider. She covered her mouth, blinked rapidly. Are you coming in? Billy asked. Malila took a deep breath. I think you need your incisions cleaned. Malila came into the house. She barely glanced at Billy as she passed him and went into the kitchen. Billy closed the front door and started following Malila. Even though Billy wasn't in practicing walking with his prosthetics, he still didn't move fast as Malila did. She was in the kitchen running water when she got in the doorway. She was talking to herself. What is he thinking? She muttered. His face isn't cute anymore. Billy found this statement helpful. This suggested that he was closer to his goal than he thought he was. He didn't want to be cute. He wanted to be robotic. Although Malala didn't come over as often over Billy's modified face, he did still talk to him frequently. They were on the phone nearly every day, even though Billy didn't tell Malala when they made arrangements with Doc to have his whites of his eyes dyed black. It was very dangerous and painful procedure, kid, Doc would say after Billy proposed the idea. I looked into it, and I can do it, but I can't use the usual anesthetic because of the potential toxic interactions. Are you sure? I am sure, Billy said. A week later, Doc picked up Billy and took him back to the basement, abandoned mental hospital. There, Doc used needles to insert black dye into the irises of the whites of Billy's eyes. The injections triggered Billy's sensory processors, which activated his vocal systems. Billy screamed during the entire procedure. When Billy returned home, he was gratified by what he saw in the mirror. The procedure was almost successful so far. His eyes, he had been intended to be, were now pitch black. Billy called Malaya and asked her to come see his eyes. He didn't sound enthusiastic about the idea, but then she agreed. When Malala arrived and looked at Billy, she seemed happier with his eyes to be official plates. Looking up to his eyes, Malala was very short. Malala said, "Well, I miss your big brown eyes, but I have to admit, it looks kind of cool. Sort of vampirish." Billy wasn't sure what vampirish was good, but he was not a robot. He was a robot, not a vampire. It was an encounter as a result. Billy had to get more research. He concluded that moving his tongue would get him closer to being a true animatronic. He could still communicate, he learned, if he had a vocal synthesizer implanted in his throat. When Billy called Doc and explained what he wanted, Doc coughed and said, "Whatever you want." Malala, however, wasn't pleased with Billy's newest upgrade. She came over to see Billy the day she got back from Doc. She gasped when Billy's opened his mouth and showed her absence of his tongue. "Why?" Malala covered out. To activate a synthesizer, Billy had to type in his intended communication on his computer. "I no longer need my tongue. A synthesizer is far more preferable." Malala opened and closed her mouth. Then she burst into tears and ran out of Billy's house. He decided Malala wasn't satisfied with his latest improvement. Next day, Malala called. "I'm very sorry I ran away," she said. Billy typed in, "That is all right. You are just not capable of understanding. It is not your fault. All humans are limited." He had to almost type when he was an animatronic, and he did not make the improvements he was making so he could be a better animatronic. He couldn't go against the programming. Instead, he told her what he was going to have done next. "Doc will be removing my ears next week," Billy said through his synthesizer. "What?" Malala shrieked. "How will you hear? I'm only having the cartilage projecting from the sides of my head removed. My auditory sensors will remain intact." "But you have nice ears," Malala said. "Ears are inconsistent with the essence of what I am," Billy said. Malala couldn't speak. Billy could hear her breathing into the phone. "Call me when you get back," she said quietly. "I will do that," Billy said. And he did. Malala came over to see him the next day. When she looked at him, Malala chewed on her lower lip. "That doesn't look all great now," she said, and glanced at the sculpture cinching up at Doc's incisions. "But after the hair grows back around them, it won't be all that noticeable. I want you to shave my head after the incisions heal," Billy said. Malala walked away from Billy and sat on the other side of the room. She stared at him for several seconds. Finally, Malala spoke. Her voice was unsteady. "Are you done now? Nothing else?" Billy shook his head. "I am not done. I have other unnecessary parts I need to be removed." Malala blinked. "Unnecessary parts?" she repeated. Billy nodded. He considered explaining the procedure to Malala, but perhaps it was advisable. Malala stood. "I need to go, Billy." Billy nodded. "All right." Malala walked over to Billy, tipped her head back as if she intended to kiss him. She closed her eyes and leaned toward him. Then she suddenly pulled back. She opened her eyes and stepped away. She lifted a hand and waved at him, and then left the house. Billy didn't see Malala anymore after that. She talked to her on the phone again, though. She called her the day she decided to change his name. "Hi, Billy," Malala, when she called. It didn't sound like she normally sounded. The way she sounded brought up an image of Billy's memory banks, an image of the way his mom had sounded the days before her death. "From now on," Billy said, "I would like to be called B7. It's a name more keeping with my true nature." Malala didn't respond. B7 heard a click, and then the whole phone's dial tone. B7 didn't call Mariah again until he had at last experienced changes done. A couple of weeks after the last surgery, however, he picked up a phone and dialed her number. "Hello?" Malala answered. "Hello, Malala. It's B7. I'm calling to see if you would join me in a celebration of my 16th. What my mom would have said is my 21st creation day. Can you help me blow out candles?" Malala was silent for a few seconds, and then she said, "I'm sorry, but I'm busy." But 7 heard a click on the phone's dial tone. On the morning B7's 16th, 21st creation day, B7 got up and prepared to put on his gray pants and gray shirt. Before he pulled them out, he felt compelled to do in his old room. He looked into the full-length mirror in the back of the room. He wanted to see the results of the work he'd done and become consistent with his true self. He thought about seeing totality of his efforts would be a fitting way to celebrate the day. When B7 faced himself in the mirror, though, something quite surprising happened. B7 no longer wanted to have a celebration ritual. Gazing at the prosthetic strapped in his 4 stumps, bright red lumpy scars on his face and the sides of his head, his ears used to be, the inky blackness of his eyes, the tongueless maw of his mouth. B7 got a sudden download of information. The download was system-wide. It was shocking. No, it was horrifying. B7 realized he was not B7. Billy's prosthetic went down from under him. He collapsed to the floor. He started to cry as if he was overwhelmed by an avalanche of memories and realizations. Mental images and sounds and words assaulted Billy as the result of completely reconfigured perceptions. In a mind-blowing instant, Billy saw himself not as the ideal animatronic he was trying to be, but as a complete failure of a man he would now never be. From the deep inside Billy, a ragged wail erupted, the sound of the guttural and garbled, but Billy more felt than heard it. The gaining tore up from within so violently that he felt like his emotions were trying to rip through his throat. Billy had no one to comfort him as the self-image he held for 16 years shattered around him. If his mom had still been there, he would have hugged him and told him it was okay and he was her son. But she was gone. Malala was gone too. Billy wriggled onto his side and curled himself into the tightest ball he could manage. He cringed at the way as all of his body modifications prodded and poked at the remaining tender skin. It felt like every nerve ending in his body was on fire, screaming in rage and pain. His chest heaved, his heart pounded. His head was suddenly so pressured that it felt like it was going to explode. For a long time, Billy lay on the floor and struggled to breathe. He cried and cried and cried. Eventually, his body didn't produce any more tears. His breathing quieted and he was spent. Billy stretched out his prosthetic legs and tried to stand, but he couldn't. He had to crawl out of his old room and down the hall to his parents' bedroom. Billy dragged himself over to the metal platform he'd been forcing himself to sleep on for so many years. The platform was cold and hard. Billy grabbed the edges of it and pulled himself upright. Jerking across the room to the computer, Billy sat in the metal chair and linked his computer to a phone so he could use the synthesizer to communicate. Wiping his wet cube face with the back of his prosthetic hand, Billy called Doc. "Can you undo what I've done?" Billy asked Doc. Doc laughed so hard he triggered a coughing fit, and then in several seconds finally said, "Sorry, kid, no can do." Another Doc's cough racked him, and then cough ended. Doc spoke for one last time. "Good luck, kid." Doc hung up. Billy set the phone down, and he didn't disconnect it. He let the dial tone buzz until the recorded voice urged him to hang up the phone. He ignored the voice until it went silent. When the phone went silent, Billy didn't move. He couldn't move. All he could do was sit and stare straight ahead. Billy wasn't sure how long he sat and stared until he blinked and noticed the room was getting darker. He looked at the clock on the computer. It was sitting on a chair for most of the day. Painfully, Billy got up. He now knew what he needed to do. Billy limped to his parents' closet. There, Billy pushed aside his own clothes, looked a few clothes from Dad hadn't taken that he had left. Billy had the same size as his dad. He reached for a pair of his dad's jeans and one of his dad's shirts, the green one. After struggling into his clothes, Billy went out of the living room. In the living room, Billy looked at the big plush gray sofa he hadn't used in years. The sofa was the same sofa his parents had sat on the night Billy was announced he was an animatronic. Billy closed his eyes, and he could see his parents, side by side, behind his little 5-year-old self. Billy stumbled to the sofa, collapsed on it. It was soft, and it embraced him. It was no human arms ever would again. Billy stayed on the sofa the rest of the night, faded from the day. He stayed on the sofa until the old dog across the street started barking. He stayed till dusk gave away to darkness. He stayed on the sofa a little while longer. Finally, Billy levered himself to the prosthetic feet. He walked to the front door and let out into the night. Billy hadn't driven since his last limb amputation. He'd never been able to get the prosthetics to work together and operate the pedals and steering wheel and gear shift at the same time. He had, however, gotten better at walking. Urgently and faltering, Billy's walk was more of a herky-jerky wobble than a walk, but it moved him forward. So Billy walked away from his house and headed down the sidewalk. Billy didn't know what time it was now, but he knew it was late. No cars were moving on the streets. All the houses were dark and the occasional porch light throwing yellow glowing fingers across the shadow-shrouded yards. Thick gray clouds had descended to the town just before dusk, and he stayed. It was moonless and starless night. The sky was a black tent pitched over the town. Billy walked on. He didn't know where he was going or set out. All he'd been trying to do was get away from his life. He'd been attempting to escape the nightmare he had created for himself. When Billy reached out how far he was going, though, he realized it was the right place. It was the only place. Billy walked up to the bent, trusted chain-link fence and surrounded his destination. His prosthetic hands gripped the links. It took past the fence. Beyond the fence lay a junkyard that Billy had won past so many times. On this way to and from Doc's old mental hospital, the junkyard, now sitting in a feeble light cast of a couple barely flickering security fixtures, was a place of discarded rubbish. Yes, this is the right place. Billy followed the fence line several feet, and he found a spot where chain-link fence bulged outward, and he turned sideways and wedged himself into the narrow opening. Inside the fence, Billy started wandering up and down the rows and derelict vehicles and old battered appliances. At the end of one row, he spotted a station wagon similar to the one that sat in the garage. The station wagon was tucked in the metal enclosure of a car compactor. The enclosed space appealed to Billy. It looked a little steel fort. Billy veered toward the car, grabbing the back door handle. Billy pulled onto it. The rusted metal door caught and creaked in protest, but Billy was able to wrench it open. He crawled inside the car. For the first time in 16 years, Billy the human crawled up on the side and went to sleep. The cloud that obscured the moon and the stars were gone when Billy woke up. At first, Billy thought it was piercingly bright sun that awakened him, but then he realized it wasn't light that intruded into his sleep. It's sound and vibration. A loud engine was rumbling. Metal was crunching and pinching and snapping, and the station wagon was juddering as if caught in an earthquake. Cringing, Billy raised his head as though to peer through the dirty back window of the station wagon. Beyond the edge of the compactor's enclosure, a man stood at the control panel. Where the man spotted Billy, Billy ducked his head down. He pressed himself against the station wagon's back seat, as in the shadow. Billy didn't think anyone could see him in there. Billy closed his eyes and waited. His wait wasn't long. A humming roar again, and the station wagon exterior began to crunch inward in high-pitched metallic screech. Billy opened his eyes. The station wagon's roof was coming down towards Billy. Even though Billy had feelings now, because he was no longer an animatronic, the collapsing roof didn't upset him at all. In fact, he welcomed it. It wasn't exactly what he wanted. As the roof plunged downward, the roaring and screeching sound amplified into a nearly deafening cacophony. The top of the station wagon compressed against Billy's body and then his skull. The pain was excruciating, and then it was complete. Every part of Billy's screaming as humanity as his car caved inward on top of Billy. Billy opened his mouth to scream. As Billy screamed, blood spurted from his mouth. For the first time, Billy welcomed the sight of his blood. It reminded him who he really was. The reminder comforted him as his consciousness gave in and let go. Holy crap. These stories are insane. Seriously. They are. Like, ugh. Goodness. The poor kid. Oh, goodness. Well, that's the end of that story. I forgot that for this entire book, really, that I used to do lessons at the end of every episode. Here's a lesson. Don't amputate every part of your dang body. That's your lesson. Don't crawl into compactors to try to fall asleep. There's a lesson. But yeah, that's the end of the book. So you guys actually get a sneak peek of the next book we're reading. This video is going to be posted on September 12th. The full video is going to be posted on September 13th. So this video is posted today, September 12th. The next video tomorrow is going to be the full book. And then September 13th is going to be this book. However, I'm going to be reading it a bit faster than normal. And it's another Minecraft book, I'm sorry. But it's actually going to go with a two-part series that I didn't read the second part to. And it is titled... Give me a second here. I have an entire thing full of the books. Here we go. Minecraft Zombies. Woo! Ain't you guys excited? But yeah, this one also, I think, actually has chapters. So hold on a second. So it says right here that the first chapter is 01 to 21. Does this book have chapters? I'm pretty sure it does. It's weird holding a small book. The other book is actually really big. Oh, it does have chapters. Fantastic. So we're reading chapter 1 to chapter 5. Now, you might be curious why I care about that. Because now I'm implementing a new way of doing things. So that goes away, and now this comes up. Chapter 1 to 5. That's right, baby. Now we actually going to have chapters, proper chapters. But yeah, that's the end of Happs. We're not reading another Tales from the Pizza Facts for a little bit, but that's okay. So, I hope you guys have a super fantastic, wonderful day. Just going to put this over here. Be polite, be efficient, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.